Hello, everyone, and welcome to Talk Nerdy. It's Monday, July 24th, and I'm your host, Cara Santa Maria. This week is a fun one because I had a chance to sit down in person while we were in New York at the NECSS conference with Britt Marie Hermes, and I'll tell you a little bit about her right after I thank those of you who made Talk Nerdy possible this week. Remember, I couldn't do Talk Nerdy without you because I do it all by my lonesome. I don't have a staff, and you guys help support the show. You keep me going week after week, really the only way that the show can stay on the air because I don't like to charge for the show. It's 100% free to download, and it's always going to stay that way. So the only way I'm able to keep it going is through ad sales and through support from listeners like you. There are many ways you can support the show. Visit carasantamaria.com to find them all. You can click through to the PayPal portal to make a one-time payment, or you can sign up at patreon.com/talknerdy to be a patron of the show, which means that you'll support it on a weekly basis as the episodes come out. Our big patrons this week are Phil T-Bear, Timothy Glover, Genji Keen, Charles Payet, Jonathan Wright, Christian Jeffrey, Jeffrey Perez, Stuart Ogue, The Honorable Husband, Jafe, Gabriel Felipe Jeromio Gonzalez, Brian Holden, and Jeffrey Sewell. And I also want to give a special shout out to Tony. I think it's Pepperoni, which makes me really happy, but it might be Pepperone. Thank you so much for your support as well. Also, there's other ways to support the show. It does not have to be financial. It does not have to be monetary. I love to get my subscription up. The show is kind of flatlined and, I have a great audience, but it would be great if we could get the word out a little bit more and improve the listenership just a little bit, because that helps me with the ad sales. So one way you can do that is just share it on social media, Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, wherever. Also rating and reviewing on iTunes, on Stitcher, on Google Play, or any place where you download your podcast is incredibly helpful. And you can also shop in the Talk Nerdy store. I've got t-shirts back in all sizes. I've got leather goods from Foster Leathercraft, and I've also got hand-thrown beautiful stoneware mugs from HP Bloomer, an incredible potter. Lots of cool stuff there on the website, so just visit it, carasantamaria.com, and check it all out. Okay, enough plugs. Enough about the show. I'm really excited this week to sit down with Britt Marie Hermes. She is fascinating. She has a fascinating story. She was one of the speakers at this year's NECSS, the Northeast Conference on Science and Skepticism that's held every year in New York City. She actually came in from Germany, where she lives. Britt is a former naturopath. She went to naturopathic school. She became a quote-unquote doctor of naturopathy, and she, busted her ass and worked really hard in that field before she started to realize that alternative medicine is not all it's cracked up to be. And when she became fully aware of the woo and the fraud and the danger of her own field that she was even involved in until, the wool was kind of pulled out from over her eyes, she then switched gears and became an advocate for helping people understand the damage that naturopathy causes. So now you can read all about her work and her journey at naturopathicdiaries.com. That's her blog. And she's also a regular contributor to Forbes, where she works, she writes these incredible columns and really blows the whistle on the entire field of naturopathy. So lots to learn, a really, really brave individual. And I'm just so honored to have her on the show. So without any further ado, here she is, Britt Marie Hermes.
I think I got bit by one of those tiger mosquitoes yesterday. Taylor was like, "Oh, Zika."
Like, mosquitoes are all over New York. I didn't realize it either. Growing up in Texas, we had mosquitoes everywhere, and then I moved to LA, and it was like
heaven, right?
Heaven.
To be
and
away from mosquitoes.
And now they're getting there.
Is that right?
Fucking climate change. It's the worst.
All of Southern California is on fire.
I know. It's hell in a handbasket. Well, Britt, I'm so excited to be doing this in person.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we were originally going to record, and then it was like issues, but you were in Germany. You live in Germany, right?
I'm in Germany, but you were in Germany.
No, I wasn't in Germany. You were in Germany, so it was really hard. No, but we were having like some issues, and then we realized, fuck, we're going to be at the same place in New York.
So let's not do this on Skype.
Exactly, because it's going to sound way better like this. I say, and then my portable recording equipment, I'm realizing, is garbage. And the funny thing is, this is what I used to do my whole podcast on, so it's definitely an improvement now. We are at NECSS which I never remember what it stands for. I'm the worst.
Hold on, I've been practicing Northeast Conference, Science and Skepticism.
Northeast Conference on Science. I always want to say New England Conference, and then that's wrong.
Right. Oh, no, it's Northeast.
Yeah, it's Northeast.
Okay.
But I'm like,
I was
what's
afraid
the difference? I don't know.
I
What's
was
the
saying
difference between New England?
I'm sure New Englanders know, and you're going to get lots of emails.
Yeah, like New Yorkers are going to be mad at me for
But so I'm an LA girl, and you're living in LA, so we don't know.
Yeah. Were you born in LA?
Yeah, I was born in Pasadena.
Oh, how funny. Yeah, so I live in Los Feliz, so I'm really close to Pass, and I've got a bunch of friends who are in Pass still. I tried to rebrand it because everybody calls it the Dina, which is ridiculous.
No.
Yeah, you're like, nobody calls it that. And so I tried to rebrand it as Passy, but people hated that too. So Pasadena's great. That's where JPL is. That's where Caltech is.
Yeah.
Other things.
Other important things.
Oh, the Huntington Gardens.
Yes.
I just went there. My boyfriend's dad was in town, and we took him to the Huntington Gardens,
Cool.
which was really nice.
Cool.
But so you live in Germany now. When did you move there?
2.5 years ago.
From where?
From Tucson, Arizona.
And before that?
Seattle, Washington.
And before that?
San Diego, California.
And then before that?
Agora Hills, California, which is where we moved right before I started high school. So I was born in Pasadena, grew up in San Dimas.
Nice. So you're still kind of LA, or I should say SoCal.
Super SoCal based
SoCal,
because my husband and I went to high school together, actually.
Oh, that's awesome.
And so our parents live literally 1.5 miles apart. So we go home, and all of our friends and family and everybody, it's a little tight-knit, north of LA community. So
that's actually really nice because when I go home to Texas, I only go like once every 2 years because it's like, it's Texas. No offense, Texas, but going back to Plano is like depressing. But my boyfriend, it's like he's from all over. Like it was, Jersey and Connecticut and New York. And so we don't ever go visit. Like his parents come to us, and then it's weird. There's no like nuclear place to go to.
That would be really hard for us because we only really go home for one holiday, and we usually choose Christmas.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't ever have to worry about like whose turn it is for Christmas.
That's so nice.
Literally will go to both families in the one day, morning with one, evening with the other. So it's super
I mean,
nice.
I have to do that when I'm in Texas because I've got to go to my dad's house and my mom's house. And I usually will go for Christmas, but I'll go the week before or the week after because I cannot stand to travel during the holidays. But we've started liking to kind of travel around Christmas time because it's freaking awesome. Like we went to the Galapagos for Christmas. We're like, sorry, family.
Well, this year, so my mom knows.
Because now
so
you're in
it's cool.
Germany.
Yeah, so this year I think we're going to stay in Europe.
Yeah.
And I think we're going to go north.
Oh, fun.
And like do proper Christmas like in Denmark or Norway even.
There are reindeer there.
I know. I'm so excited. Closer to Santa. I just want to be in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah.
I want a shit ton of snow.
Yeah.
I want my dog to run around the snow because they love it.
Yeah, a friend of mine just got back from Norway and they rode, like they did dog sledding. Yeah. It's like, she's like, you're like walking on a glacier.
Yeah.
And I was like, where do you pee? And she was like, on the glacier.
On the glacier. Yeah, I'm super excited.
Yeah. Peeing on a glacier is, I think, a way to spend Christmas. So what are you doing in Germany?
So we moved there because my husband Taylor was offered a PhD in archaeology.
Cool.
So that's what drew us there.
And where are you? In like Bavaria?
No, we're way north. So we're in a
okay.
little town called Kiel. It's super small. It's north of Hamburg for people who know Germany and close to the Denmark border. So I don't know, an hour by car.
Gotcha. But everybody speaks German?
Everybody speaks German. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, in academia, everyone speaks English. Mm-hmm. So we go to the university campus or the uni clinic, which is where I work, and people speak English. But when you're grocery shopping and like going to Starbucks and things like that, it's mostly in German. So my German is passable. I'm learning.
That's good.
But outside of the context of whatever it is that we're talking about, I can't communicate.
When I went to Germany, I couldn't read the street signs.
Yeah.
I was like, this
well,
is
and
very
they just
confusing.
add words together. So then you have these ginormous.
Yeah, these big compound, I guess is a better way to put it, words.
So I was, I did a master's of science there.
Oh, cool. Okay. So I guess we should take a few steps back. And obviously part of this podcast is going to be telling your story that you tell when you go to skeptic conferences and, you know, this kind of new life that you found since you used to be a naturopath.
Yeah.
And so I say naturopath just to not add the word doctor after.
Yeah.
There are some laws and rules about whether or not you can call yourself, maybe you can call yourself a doctor, but you couldn't call yourself a physician or,
That's
you know,
right.
different. Yeah. It looked like different states have their own rules about what you can and can't do. So when you got your Master's of Science, was that after you had already left naturopathy?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So this was kind of like, I'm shifting gears now and I'm starting a new life.
Yeah, so it happened really quickly. I mean, the short and dirty timeline of it all was I decided to leave the profession in May, I believe,
Of
2014.
Okay.
God, I hope that's right. Yeah, 2014. It was Mother's Day weekend, actually. So my future mother-in-law was in town. So this date is like sealed in my head.
And at this point, were you already living in Germany?
No. So I'm in Tucson, Arizona.
Gotcha.
And then Taylor and I got engaged. He got this offer to go to Germany. We jumped on it because you want to live in Europe. You have the opportunity to live in Europe. So let's go. I, at this point, already knew that I wasn't going to continue in a career as a naturopath for reasons that we'll talk about, in a minute. But I had no idea what I was going to do now because I have this naturopathic doctorate, I'm air quoting, that literally couldn't get me hired anywhere. It has
except for
except
a naturopathy clinic.
except a naturopathy clinic. So I couldn't get hired as like in a nursing role. I couldn't get hired as a phlebotomist even.
Oh, wow.
I went for jobs as like a hospital liaison, like trying to pitch myself to the HR team as like, listen, I'm trained as a naturopath, but I don't want to be a naturopath. I'm totally against this now. Let me come in and talk to your patients to convince them to listen to medical advice and why it's dangerous to go for alternative medicine. But doctors didn't want to touch me with a 10-foot pole.
Yeah. Well, that's kind of a good sign in a way. It's a good sign. I mean, it does kind of, I think, make me have hope for the future that physicians were like, oh, naturopathy, we don't need you in our clinic.
Yeah, basically, they didn't want me anywhere near their patients.
But that sucked for you at the time.
Super sucked.
Yeah.
So,
and what if you hadn't already realized that naturopathy was like, hucksterism? That would have been a rude awakening, right?
Yeah, totally.
To say, like, I want to go mainstream. I want to go, I'm a doctor. I'm sure a lot of people get through it. Or like, I'm a doctor. Like, maybe I can get hired at a clinic. And then they're like, no, you have to go to these special clinics.
Yeah, exactly. So I was basically open to doing anything. I just needed a way to reinvent myself, but also I knew I needed to re-educate myself.
Sure, yeah.
And so I was really, really fortunate in that the higher education is free in Germany. And there was a Master of Science program in biomedical research. The program was in English. It's free. And they were sort of catering to an international population.
Nice.
So I went, I got an interview, which was amazing. And then I flew to Germany in person for the interview because I knew that I was going to have to explain myself to this committee and try to basically beg them to let me in. And the interview was tough. They were like, listen, we don't know if you can do this because I have an undergraduate degree in psychology and then this naturopathic degree. And they're like, this is really heavy genetics, really heavy microbiology, biochemistry. Like you say yourself that your sciences were light, if really legitimate at all. So this is a master's program. Like we can't hold your hand through this.
Did they let you take some catch-up classes?
So I was accepted on, but I had to do some internship work beforehand. Okay. And so I didn't do catch-up courses, but I was required to do, they set me up with some internship just to get some lab experience because literally I had never pipetted anything in my life.
Yeah, it's important. Just the simple things like using a pH meter.
I didn't know what PCR stood for. I mean, like super basics. And then I was like, I'll be fine. I'm smart. I can study. I came home that first day of class from my molecular biology course, and I just cried.
I'm sure.
I totally lost it. And my husband gave me like 15 pep talks in like the first month. But I had to go back to the basics. I was like, all right. And fortunately, Taylor studied a lot of chemistry in undergrad before he switched to archaeology. So I was like, let's get out the periodic table.
I can only imagine. Like I'm feeling like these empathy pangs right now because I had an undergrad in psych and then moved into biology also. Granted, I only took a year off in between. I didn't become a naturopathic doctor in between, which is going to be the bulk of what we talk about. But I remember in order to start my master's in biology, I was lucky enough that they were like, listen, like you need to take a couple classes. Just take intro bio, because I hadn't taken it, and animal phys. And so I took those 2 classes, and they were tough, but I got through them. And I remember my first day of my neuroscience class in the biology department, and my professor was like, okay, so a neuron is just like any other cell in the body. It has mitochondria, it has a rough ER, it has a smooth ER. And I was like, I don't know what any of those things are. Like,
Totally.
you know, I was so behind.
Totally.
Because a lot of psychology departments, the psychobiology side of it is so minimal.
Oh, really?
It's like, I felt like I got a really good undergrad education in statistics. Like my stat skills, I think, were better than most biologists that I met when I was getting my master's. But my basic biology, I had none, like from my psychology degree. Did you feel like you at least got a little in psychology?
I felt like actually I had a little bit from naturopathic school.
Gotcha.
But
yeah, because you're going to learn some basic things about physiology.
But it was like a 101, 105 type course. But at least I knew some things. But I remember thinking, so, you know, the classes, I mean, my master's program is really aimed at translational medicine. And so there was a lot of like clinical information interwoven into everything we did. So like we had a pathology course, but the whole first semester was molecular pathology.
Yeah.
And so like we're going through things like the cell cycle. And I was like, I don't remember any of this.
Like let's talk glycolysis. Like let's not.
And it actually ended up being more difficult for me when the clinical information was integrated in because I had wrong information.
Yeah. I mean, because it's not like you were starting from a place of just lacking information. You were having to rewrite your memory.
And I couldn't remember. I didn't know what was true or not. So I had these connections and like things that I had studied hard and learned. And then I was like, fuck, is this real?
And yeah, knowing the difference. I mean, I'm reminded of when I was a little kid, I was raised Mormon, and in the Mormon faith, there's like the Bible, like you read the Old and the New Testament, but then you also read the Book of Mormon and the Pearl of Great Price and all these books, and then they're all cross-tabbed and referenced. So like I would meet other kids who were like Christian kids, just like I was, and I would be like, yeah, but the Nephites and the Lamanites, and they were like, what the fuck is that? You know, because I couldn't parse out the difference, right? It's the same kind of thing. It's all so woven together and sort of cross-referenced in your mind that your naturopathic response to some physiological issue, it's like, wait, was that real biology or was that gobbledygook that I was taught?
Yeah.
So let's talk about that, because I want to go back to before, actually first, sorry, I always change tenses. Are you in the middle of your degree now, or have you finished?
I graduated at the end of March.
Congratulations. Oh, just a couple months ago.
Just a couple months ago.
That's amazing.
And
Congrats.
I just started in May a PhD program.
Oh, that's great. That's great. And what are you studying?
Evolutionary genomics.
Ooh.
Yeah. So our lab group is interested in the interactions that take place between the host and its genome and our associated microbial partners.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, how interesting. And that's in Germany.
It's in Germany.
So you're going to be there for a while.
Yeah. Gonna be there for a while.
And your husband, where is he in his degree program?
He should be he's writing.
Gotcha.
So he should be
ABD
done
now.
Fall is, I hope.
And I'm starting my PhD program
in
the fall.
Are you?
Yeah,
Congrats.
I'll start in September. So, woo.
Where?
It's a program in Santa Barbara called Fielding, and it's a clinical PhD.
Cool.
Yeah, in psychology.
Cool.
That should be fun.
Is it the PsyD?
No, it's actually a PhD, but it's very clinically oriented.
Cool.
So, but you still do the dissertation and all of that good stuff. I looked into PsyD programs, and I almost went PsyD, but Fielding is an interesting program because it has a distributed learning model. So you go to campus like 3 times a year, but you actually do all of the coursework like a lot of med schools do it, where the lectures are online and you can watch them. Because I travel so much, I think it'll work really well with my schedule. So
I wanted to do that.
We're like the old ladies getting PhDs.
Yeah, it's true. I'm so old.
We're not old.
Especially, we're not old.
We're not old, damn it. But I have a lot of friends with PhDs that are like 29,
it drives
30.
me crazy.
Yeah, and I'm like, I'm just starting.
There's a girl in our lab. I think she's 25.
Yeah.
She's from Belgium. So, like, things tend to move a bit faster in Europe.
Oh, that's true, because PhDs, you don't have coursework, do you? Oh, I'm so jealous.
I know.
I have about 2 to 3 years of coursework to get through. I'm thinking a lot of it will be repetition.
Yeah.
You know, like things that I had learned, but I'm just going to bone up on it. But
Yeah.
then the research.
Yeah.
And for clinical psychology, you do clinic hours, right? So a lot of it's seeing patients. But I'm really excited.
That's awesome.
Yeah. It should be fun.
That was my plan to go to PsyD before I found naturopathy.
Oh, really?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because we both had psych undergrads.
Mm-hmm.
And I bet you there's some crossover there. But PsyDs are legitimate.
Well, it was health psychology. So I had a...
Oh, interesting. So you were on the health side anyway.
Yes. So I had it. So I went to San Diego State for my
Mm-hmm.
undergrad. And in my last year, I had a bunch of just like free electives that I just needed to take to graduate. And so I was taking biology and neuroscience courses. I had almost gone to USC for the psychobio program.
And then also SDSU combined with UCSD has a joint
Oh, is that right?
clinical neuropsychology program, like
Okay.
a really competitive clinical neuropsychology
Yeah.
program.
So they were a good school.
Yeah.
I enjoyed it there. And in my last year, I had this health psych teacher that was really into woo.
Interesting. Yeah, it's
Super
there's a lot of psych
into
people
it.
like that.
And actually, he was part of this that pyramid scheme supplement, like multi-level marketing supplement program, and I was
yeah.
buying supplements from him.
What are
and,
they called again? I see them driving around in their trucks. They always have the sticker on the back of their truck.
I don't remember the brand of this
Something
one.
Life. Yeah, I guess there's a few.
There's
different
so many.
ones.
I don't
There's so
remember
many.
I don't remember this
Yeah.
one now. But like he totally planted, and like we went through motivational interviewing. And this blew
Wow.
my mind, right? And it was, but
Wow.
all of the motivational interviewing was all like aimed at making lifestyle choices and proper nutritional choices. And then somehow this like bled into naturopathy. So then
Interesting.
when I found the naturopathic medicine program at Bastyr online, the marketing language that they used to have, which has changed since I started blogging, which is interesting. But the marketing language that it used to be was like, I just remember resonating with me in this this context of health psychology.
Yeah.
Like we partner with you. We're your partners in health. You will be trained as a doctor, but you're really going to take like this, hand-in-hand approach with the patient and work with them at every step. And you're going to talk about sleep hygiene and meal hygiene and like everything you need to do so you can get them off medications and they'll never need medications again.
And isn't there a lot of like instead of saying traditional, they say allopathic,
Yeah.
right? So allopathic just means like legitimate board certified medicine. Yeah, people who have like licenses to practice medicine. So they'll say like allopathic doctors just treat the symptoms, but
Yep.
we treat the whole body,
Yep.
right? Like
Yep.
we do preventive medicine.
Yeah, we treat the whole person, so
The whole
that's a big one.
person.
We find the root cause of disease. So diabetes is a classic, type 2 diabetes is a classic example.
Mm-hmm.
Like we will help you get off metformin, we will help you get off insulin if you're insulin dependent, and we will get to the root cause of your diabetes, which of course will include weight loss and nutritional changes, but also like, there must be inflammation. And
Gotcha.
maybe even like depending on which naturopath you're talking to, like there's some energy blockage or maybe there's some grief that you're processing or who knows what.
So even within naturopathy, there's like levels of woo.
Oh yeah.
Nice.
Oh,
So
yeah.
are there some naturopaths that are like you almost wouldn't know that they're not physicians just because they talk the talk so well?
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. I think and so I aspire to be that type of naturopath.
Yeah. Yeah, because you had a psychology degree. Like you were in academia. You saw like legitimate licensed professionals doing their craft, and then you decided I want to help people. And
Exactly.
this is a good. So okay. You find naturopathy. You find this program. It's an online degree program.
No.
No, you actually go brick and mortar.
Yep.
Okay. How long was the program?
4 years.
Wow.
Yep.
So it's like going to medical school.
It's set up to look as much like medical school as possible.
Yeah.
So in every way that they can emulate medical school, the naturopathic schools are doing this.
Okay, so 4 years. I'm assuming they're all private.
Yep.
Yeah, so a lot of money.
Technically not for profit, although this is questionable.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
So there's some wiggly lines
Private.
there.
So Bastyr itself costs, I think including living expenses, I think without living expenses. God, I don't remember.
Yeah, it's usually without.
Without living expenses, I think it's about $40,000 a year.
Yeah. I mean, and the truth is my PhD program is going to cost over $100,000 by the time I'm
Yeah.
done because it's private.
Yeah.
And it's like
Yeah.
in that way, it's medical school costs that much, if not more.
Yeah,
more. Unless you're going to a public university, that is not necessarily a red flag. Like, oh, it's expensive. That almost reinforces that makes it's legitimate.
Yeah, exactly. So there was that price tag. Mm-hmm. There's language on the website that they, rated one of the top best medical schools in the country by what's that? The people who rate the colleges.
Oh yeah. And so they call it a medical school.
Yeah, because the naturopathic profession like inserts its propaganda into like any like domain that's willing to take that information, and they literally just regurgitate it. So if someone from Bastyr contacts the people who rate the medical schools or colleges in the U.S. and says, we're an accredited medical school, that person says, great, let me plug you into the system. And now Bastyr shows up on the list.
Oh, it's the Princeton Review, I think.
Princeton Review.
Yeah,
Thank you.
So. Yeah.
Thank you. Yeah.
And so because they're a college of naturopathic medicine.
Exactly.
Like that's what they call themselves. So they say, and they're accredited by their own internal accreditation.
Yeah. So this is another problem, is that people don't actually realize what accreditation means.
Yeah.
And so Bastyr was sort of like, in my opinion, misrepresenting the term. Mm-hmm. And truthfully, I didn't understand what accreditation meant. I just knew that you want your school to be accredited.
Of course. But you have to know who the body is that's doing the accreditation.
So literally, the former president, and one of the co-founders of Bastyr, named Joseph Pizzorno. He's still alive. He's still in practice. He runs like some woo-woo naturopathic labs and writes books and speaks, the whole shebang. He started the accreditation board. And so he was simultaneously serving, on the accreditation board, like as the president or executive director, whatever the term is, and also the president of Bastyr.
So he's accrediting himself.
Exactly. And he's hiring all of the people on both boards. Wow. And so then they get together and they're like, our school's great. What do we want in our school? Oh, look. But yet there's a whole clause that you're not supposed to have this conflict of interest. But somehow the U.S. Department of Education, who says whether or not the accrediting body is legitimate or not, like missed this.
So according to the U.S. Department of Education, this was a legitimate accreditation.
Yep.
Wow. And so, of course, then they can tout that.
Exactly.
And they're going to tout that.
Exactly. And they need this in order for students to get access to federal student loans to pay the $40,000 a year. And so this was the kicker. The school couldn't and still can't financially survive without the tuition from its students. Mm-hmm. I don't know how normal this is. Like, I don't have any context to place this in, but I know that the school is not financially solvent without this money.
Yeah.
And so getting this accreditation allowed the school to flourish in this way that it wouldn't have been possible without it.
I think that is I think that's the case for undergraduate institutions typically, right? Like you have a university that does graduate level research. The graduate students are usually funded by the professors, and that's from grant money. But the they're reliant on the undergraduate tuition to be able to continue to go. But I'm not really sure how it works in medical schools, because they're usually their own standalone institutions. And I know that those are generally private and pretty expensive. But also, like, those are legitimate professors teaching the classes.
That's the other piece of it, yeah.
Yeah, and they're doing, like, they require a lot of lab equipment. They require, medicine.
Yeah, I mean, the cadaver program, right?
Yeah.
And standardized patients for students to learn on. Now, Bastyr has some of those things.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, because that's the whole thing in pseudoscience. Like, it's pseudoscience. It still kind of comes off legit.
Exactly.
So what kinds of things did they do that were legitimate seeming?
Well, the gross anatomy class was super legitimate seeming. Like,
so you had a cadaver?
Mm-hmm, I had a cadaver.
Wow.
I dissected it with, so there was 4 students to a cadaver. And we had cadavers because the University of Washington basically would donate them. Or there was some system of sharing that we were allowed to have them. And our gross anatomy teacher was awesome. She knew what she was doing, for sure.
That's great because, I mean, not for nothing. Obviously, you got a lot out of your naturopathy program. Like, it's contributing to a lot of what you're doing now. But at least you did have some, like, you didn't quite get your money's worth, but you got something out of it, which is good. But what if the things that had been taught in gross anatomy were all crazy?
Yeah. Yeah. But and as soon as you stepped out of, the gross anatomy lab, this professor was super into the naturopathic message. You know what I mean? So like if you're dealing with her outside of the classroom, like you're in the context of nonsense.
Yeah.
And so, I never really had much interaction with her like otherwise, but I can imagine that students would then have interactions with professors that would sort of reinforce the woo somehow, because you're like, look at this person who's legitimate,
Yeah.
and they're teaching at Bastyr.
Yeah.
They're choosing to teach at Bastyr. And then you think like, oh, this must be real because she's
Yeah.
a good teacher. So
And she believes it all.
Yeah.
Yeah, she's touting it as well. So, okay, maybe we should define what naturopathy really is. I feel like we throw the term around a lot. And I think people think, alternative medicine, homeopathy, naturopathy, it's all just kind of the same thing, right? But naturopathy is kind of specific.
it's kind of specific, but also annoyingly broad.
Gotcha. Okay.
So any alternative medicine can fit into the umbrella of naturopathy.
So a naturopath is a quote unquote physician who practices alternative medicine.
Who practices alternative medicine. And what type of alternative medicine that naturopath practices is up to him or her. So it includes homeopathy, which is like the mother of all like pseudosciences.
Mm-hmm.
It includes traditional Chinese medicine. So you're going to find naturopaths who do acupuncture and will prescribe traditional Chinese herbs. It includes regular like botanical medicine, herbalism. It includes shamanism, actually.
all
It
right.
includes astrology. Numerology for sure, actually. Just like a lot of like energy medicine and the laying on of hands.
Yeah.
It also includes some faith healing, I would stick in there.
Wow, really?
Yeah, because there's this idea that because we treat the whole person, that in order to be like really emotionally healthy, you need faith. And that
Or
they
else you
will,
have a hole.
or else you have a hole.
Yeah.
And they refer back to the research that looks at people who are involved in church, if they live longer, healthier lives, and
Because they have a congregation.
right,
Yeah.
they don't
Social support.
Yeah, they don't tease apart the
Yeah,
social
yeah.
support and the social community, but it's just part of this idea that in order to be healthy, you need to have your emotional soul fed.
Interesting. So a lot of it is also just like kind of armchair, unlicensed psychology.
I did so much counseling.
Wow. Without a license to
Well, it depends on what state you're in, actually, because based on the laws, because naturopathy is regulated state by state, I could technically practice counseling in some states.
Wow.
I think Washington. But I did a lot of armchair psychology. And I would bill by time. So I'd be like, oh, you're here, and we talk for 45 minutes about the stress of your daughter leaving for school. Money.
Wow. And so it is interesting because state by state has their own regulations. There's no kind of federal overlying body. And like you said, some of them, okay, maybe you can be considered a counselor and you can do this level of counseling, but you're obviously not a PhD psychologist.
Right.
So, you're not a licensed psychotherapist,
Right.
But a counselor. And then some of them say that like you can suture and sometimes you can't suture. They're all pretty okay with you, quote unquote, prescribing vitamins and supplements, right? Like that's a big part of the system is like hawking supplements.
And you're allowed to sell them out of your office.
Gotcha.
And you're allowed to mark up the cost.
Okay.
So you're basically allowed to operate like a retail store.
And I mean, I think people see that at their other like at their chiropractors. It's the same thing. They're selling. Whereas doctors can't do that. Like they can write you a prescription.
No, they can't.
But then you have to go to a pharmacy and get your prescription.
Yeah.
Like the only thing a doctor can really do that's close to that is give you a sample.
Yeah.
But that's
And even that is, I think that can get into the gray zone.
interesting.
I think
I wouldn't be surprised
because
it's been a while since I've gotten
because
one.
the doc is, I think, attaching his or her name with that
Exactly.
brand. I think that gets tricky.
I mean, I used to love it when I would like get
Free
a new birth
samples.
control, and I was like, yes.
The
'cause
birth control samples were the best.
I know, because I'm on NuvaRing, and it was so expensive back in the day. And it'd be
I know
like, "Here's an
exactly what
extra,"
you
and
mean.
You're like, yes, okay,
I'm gonna
thank you.
store this in my fridge.
Yeah. No, seriously, so helpful.
Men don't understand.
But so you wouldn't be able to write somebody a prescription for NuvaRing. Really?
Oh yeah.
How?
Well, so in Washington and Arizona, where I was licensed.
Uh-huh.
Now, and I'll explain California because it's different. But so some of the most, I guess, liberal states for naturopaths would be Washington, Oregon, Arizona. And so in these 3 states, and perhaps others that I'm not thinking of because West Coast oriented.
Because there's 50. Yeah, and you
there's 50.
know them all.
I could call myself a physician, And
Wow.
I could write prescriptions for medications, including birth control and some scheduled drugs. So, like most antibiotics, if not all of them, for example.
Wow. And probably things like diflucan for
Yeah.
a
Oh,
yeast
yeah.
infection.
Yeah. And
Things that like don't have potential
exactly.
for abuse.
And some steroids I could prescribe. I could write marijuana prescriptions. Well, recommendations. You don't prescribe. Recommend
true, yeah.
marijuana in Washington and Arizona, but not in Oregon. You can't do that. And then there were some painkillers, but I never did.
Gotcha. You didn't want to open that can of worms.
Well, it's just it's so complicated.
Yeah.
It's so complicated. And then you have to, you're supposed to be registering the patient in the system to make sure that, they're not getting more pills than they're supposed to and that you're in compliance with all of the state law. And I don't know how to recommend. So I took one class in pharmacology that was taught by a naturopath. Mm-hmm. So literally every time I was writing prescription, I'm looking up how to prescribe that medication.
Like what's the standard dosage?
What's the standard dosage?
Wow.
Every time.
Because in your pharmacology class, how much of it was like herbs?
Well, it was all pharma.
It was real pharmacology.
It was all, well, I mean, I don't know. I have nothing to compare it to.
But like I took a pharmacology class in graduate school, a neuropsychopharmacology class.
Okay.
Like I don't remember. I didn't learn about prescriptive authority. I just learned like, what beta blockers do.
Yeah. So, I mean, it was kind of like that. This is
Yeah.
what a beta blocker does. These are the indications to prescribe it. And then, you're sort of given general dosing recommendations, but it was always like, but of course, if you have to prescribe this, you got to look it up.
Yeah. Yeah. And like, I guess I remember learning about like LD50s and, it's like, this is how much L-Dopa you'd have to take to die.
I remember looking at the curve and being like, but then we're never, but like we would look at the curve and we're like, but we're never tested on it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so crazy. And you're like, I don't want to kill my patient.
I'm like, that's good. Next.
Wow. And so really a lot of you're just pulling it out of your ass. Like you're trying to remember best.
Well, so what I did, and I don't necessarily know what other people did, but what I did was I quickly befriended local pharmacists. So Washington, Seattle, which is like one of the mecca for like natural medicine, it was really easy. And so during school at Bastyr, I had worked at a store called Pharmaca. I think they have them in California. So
I don't know. Is it like
it's marketed as an integrative pharmacy.
Oh, interesting.
So it's like the definition of combining like real prescriptive medicines with supplements and tons of homeopathy and lots of herbal products.
So it's like if Walgreens and like the vitamin section of Whole Foods had a baby.
And if you only included all the bath and beauty products that were organic.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So everything's super expensive. It's only rich white women shopping there. And you have women coming in for like cough and cold syrup, and they're picking something up off the shelf, which is next to a real cough and cold syrup, but not realizing that it's homeopathic.
Oh, no. And then they're bringing it home to treat their child.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Because you literally can't tell the difference when you're looking at the labels.
Oh, you can't. I had a sty in my eye. We talked about this on Skeptic's Guide. I got a sty in my eye, and I didn't know at the time that there's kind of no treatment for a sty. It's just hot compress. Yeah. And so before I ended up doing that, I went to the store I was at the store for some other reason, and I was like, oh, I should see if there's any sty medicine, because I assumed there would be like a topical antibiotic or not a topical, but one that you put in your eye, right? Because I know you can put like Neosporin in your eye, so I was like, oh, you can do that with dogs at least. I don't know about people. I've definitely had a vet recommend that I do that with my dog. But I'm looking, and I see like 5 or 6 sty treatments, and I was like, oh, okay. So I start reading them all. And they were all homeopathic because there is no treatment for a sty. And then when people say, no, I swear to God it works, I put it in and 3 days later my sty was gone. I'm like, yeah, that's about how long it takes for a sty to go away on its own.
Yeah.
And people, I mean, it's very hard to know the difference because we have our own immune systems.
Yeah. Yeah.
Some of these things just pass.
Yep.
And in America, at least, for people who are listening outside of the States, because I don't know what the laws are everywhere, you do still, even in like a Walgreens or, any traditional pharmacy, you have homeopathic treatments literally next to the legitimate ones.
Yep.
But here, of course, the ratio is amped up.
I would say the homeopathic products outweigh the other ones because people don't want the other ones because you pick up, Robitussin and you read red dye number 40 and people are like, oh, this causes cancer.
Oh my God.
And I'm not going to give this to my baby and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, and they're like dextromethorphan. I can't pronounce this. I don't want to feed it. It's like, no,
Exactly.
that's real cough suppressant.
The irony is amazing, though, because once you know that the supplement company is not regulated, I mean, you literally don't know what you're giving your child when you give them a homeopathic cough syrup.
Well, and that's why there was that whole debacle around Highlands. Yeah, and belladonna,
Yeah,
right?
the teething tablets.
Teething tablets that had poison in them.
Yep.
I mean, that's insane.
Yep. So I became very good friends with the pharmacist here, and I would I had all of these apps and like things to look up dosing information, but I would almost always call my prescription into her at Pharmaca, and she would catch errors. And she would call me. She was very sweet and said, "This is what you've prescribed. This is the standard. What would you like to do?" And sort of like she was very kind about it.
Yeah.
She didn't make me feel stupid. It was just like,
She never said you made a mistake. She said,
No.
like, I just want to make sure this is the actual dosage. You want. Yeah.
Exactly. And so she helped me out a lot.
That's good.
Oh, thank God.
Yeah. Because you actually had the potential to hurt people.
Yeah.
And most states actually, at least, are regulated to the extent that naturopaths can only prescribe like herbs.
So in California, naturopaths can use the term doctor. They can't use the term physician.
As if anybody knows the difference. But
If anybody knows the difference. And in order to write prescription, so they can write a handful of prescription medications, but these prescriptions have to be laid out in sort of a supervision contract with a medical doctor who's willing to supervise that aspect of the naturopath's practice. And so the naturopath is required to like submit some sort of contract to the medical doctor that says, I want to be able to prescribe these 6 antibiotics for urinary tract infections. I want to be able to prescribe diflucan for a yeast. And they're required to lay it all out. Like, given I've cultured for yeast or whatever, right? And it's still quite limited in terms of what they can do.
And how many doctors are willing to oversee that?
This is a fascinating question. I don't know, because I would think that the level of malpractice would just, the risk, right, would skyrocket.
But it's also probably a significant marketing tool if a naturopathy clinic has an MD on staff. And if they just have one MD on staff, and that MD, maybe ethically, they either don't understand why it's a problem or they don't care, maybe they get paid 10 times as much as everybody else and they're willing to stay.
Oh, exactly.
You know what I mean?
They get sort of a cut of the profits. Plus, you imagine that they're selling supplements.
Yeah, that's true.
And then it's an inter-referral system of like, oh, you have chronic fatigue. I don't really know. There's nothing else we can do. Go see my naturopath.
Oh, gosh.
And then it's even more legitimate. I would talk to a lot of medical doctors, and I could convince, if it was the right person, I could convince them that I sort of knew what I was doing.
Yeah.
There were clear limits to my
But you
training.
could probably definitely convince a patient.
Oh, absolutely.
A medical doctor is different. Their standard's going to be higher, but even probably somebody, like you said, with like a fair amount, because you too had a fair amount of training. 4 years of training for this doctorate, basically, and it doesn't get you any jobs except to be a naturopath.
Except to be a naturopath. And you have to realize, like, when we're talking to lawmakers and journalists and patients, we're picking and choosing what we tell them we learned. So I never told anybody that I took a year of homeopathy courses and that I was required to know a shit ton of homeopathic knowledge for my, air quote, board exams. I just don't mention that.
Yeah.
I don't mention that I took energy healing courses.
When did you realize that you weren't really buying into it? Was it during the school? Did you have like these questions during homeopathy, or did it all kind of coalesce later?
So homeopathy perplexed me. I actually didn't know about homeopathy before starting naturopathic school. So I really became brainwashed in school because I didn't know about all of these other therapies. I only knew about supplements, good nutrition, and like whatever my health psychology teacher had told me.
Yeah, I think that when I first kind of entered into the skeptic world, I had heard the word homeopathy, but I just assumed it meant alternative medicine. I just assumed it was like herbs.
Right.
Yeah, I didn't really know that it was the dilutions and this whole specific mechanism by which water has memory.
Yeah. So I didn't know really about any of that. And then in my first year of school, I got this really nasty spider bite. It was on my thigh, and it like was really hot and really itchy, and it was like growing, And so I had drawn the black marker around it, and I was all scared that it was like some nasty spider bite. And it was really bothering me in class. So I went up to my professor, because she was a naturopath, on break, and I was like, I have this nasty spider bite. Will you look at it? Or I don't know, like, what do I do? Should I be putting Benadryl cream on it? She's like, oh my God, do you know what homeopathic remedy you need? And I was like, no, because I don't know anything about homeopathy.
Yeah.
And she's like, you need this remedy called apis. It's for these really hot, like swollen wounds that were caused by a puncture. And since you've been bitten, this is perfect for you. So like typically we give it to patients who've had a bee sting, but since like the spider bite is presenting that way, this is what you need. So she's like, go upstairs to the bookstore, pick up Apis 30C, and you're going to take 4 tablets every 30 minutes until it goes away.
Oh my God, that's a lot.
I was like, perfect. And so you go upstairs, and and she's like, oh, you'll know when you need to redose because it'll start to itch again. I was like, perfect. And she's standing there. She's like, oh, I can feel the energy coming off of it. And I was like, oh, I'm so excited because for $8, I can go get the cure for this problem. So I went upstairs and I took it. And my experience was I thought it worked.
Mm-hmm. Because you were healing on your own.
I was healing on my own. And I don't know. I was also busy, and probably just taking something made me feel like it was getting better. And of course it was going to get better anyway. But then I was like, I would find myself itching it. And I was like, oh, she's right. She told me this is when I need. Look, it's exactly 3 hours later.
Wow.
So like I had this experience where I was like, homeopathy. Okay. So I was starting to buy into it.
Yeah. Like when it's real to you, it so reinforces it.
And then I took a class. We were required to take all of these classes. And information would just sound so crazy. But I'd be like, oh, but it's worked for me.
Mm-hmm.
And then we'd have all these guest teachers come in, and they would tell these amazing miracle stories, especially for patients with mental health problems. And I just thought it was, I wasn't willing to dismiss it, I guess. I wanted to stay, I thought there was something like important about staying open-minded and like considering it.
Well, and obviously it's motivated reasoning at this point. You're spending so much money. You're in it to win it. Like, obviously it's a huge bummer if it's not real. So you're not going to go to that place first. You're not even going to go to it once you really deep down start to go to it. But I'm wondering, what's the narrative that they use to protect against the skepticism? Is it just that like, this is what mainstream medicine doesn't want you to know about this? It's a conspiracy to keep people sick. Like, what kind of a narrative do they use when people go, why am I not just training to be like a doctor?
Right. There's a couple different things. Mm-hmm. One is that the current like medical research system can't properly test alternative therapies because alternative therapies don't fit into the randomized controlled trial setup.
Okay.
And because it's so individualized, you can't like perform a standardized analysis of these therapies. And homeopathy, that's especially true. Especially true.
So that's why they always show like null results. It's because, we're not looking at it at the individual level. We're grouping too big of a group of people together and the results are getting washed out.
And even when the results are positive, you can usually find something in the setup that would kind of create that positive. Like oftentimes there's a ton of individual counseling that's provided because in order to find the correct homeopathic remedy, you usually do these like 2 or 3 hour counseling sessions with the practitioner.
So then it's just study effects. It's the fact that they're in a study,
right?
That they have better outcomes,
right? Or counseling or whatever, or whatever.
Yeah, but it's because they have access to medical care and people listening to them that they didn't have otherwise.
And then the other argument is that for the more, I would say, modern naturopaths, is that they think that we should be practicing in conjunction with medical doctors, sort of like the yin and yang, like we need both pieces in order to create a whole medical system. And so like we pretend that we're not anti-medicine and pretend like we're not anti-medical doctor, also because you can't really catch too many patients that way.
Yeah, that's true.
So it serves you from a business perspective to be like, oh, no, you should continue to see your medical doctor. Plus, it takes some liability off of you, right? Like when you really need someone to make sure that the cardiovascular medication is right.
Absolutely.
Right? But you say, but you need me too. Because the medical doctor doesn't know that this diuretic that you're on is, like depleting you of these certain micronutrients. And so we're going to do all this testing for micronutrients, and we're going to look at things that your medical doctor doesn't know how to look at.
You know, I have a friend who is like deeply entrenched in kind of some nutrition woo, and she sees, and I don't know, I can't follow up on any of this. I'm not going to like look through her records or anything, but she sees what she says is a real doctor. Like if she needs a real prescription, her doctor will write her the prescription, but she'll never jump to that first. And she'll always prescribe her like some wooey garbage before she prescribes her the real stuff. But she's really into like testing her blood for metals.
Yeah.
It's like and she's always doing these like chelation therapies.
Yeah.
She's always telling her that she doesn't have the right quantities of bacteria in her gut or in her vagina or whatever. And she's constantly having to take massive doses of probiotics and then things to chelate like her whatever poisoning, that she's constantly got some sort of poisoning.
Because she's somehow been exposed to these like mysterious sources.
Yeah, it's like,
heavy
because of all
metals.
the fish you eat, you have mercury poisoning. But you can't start working on a fungal infection in your gut.
Like a systemic fungal.
Yeah.
Candida.
Is that a common?
Oh yeah.
That's just, you have a systemic fungal infection because of your metal poisoning.
Okay, so many things.
Uh-huh.
So naturopaths blame heavy metals for a lot of illnesses.
Okay.
A lot of illnesses.
So that's a red flag there.
It's a red flag.
Because if you have like legitimate mercury poisoning,
you're
like,
going to be very sick.
Very sick. Okay.
Very, very sick.
Yeah.
And so there's really no good reason to think that the average person has been exposed to toxic levels of heavy metals and that you need to chelate them with, typically with EDTA, which is given intravenously. But these therapies are money makers. So the testing is either a hair or urine or blood test. Oftentimes it's sort of like a provoked test. So you like force somehow excretion out of the whatever, right? And you mail it away to a lab that has naturopaths on staff or is marketed by naturopaths. You get these test results back with recommendations that are listed alongside.
Oh, interesting.
The levels often.
Which is never the case with like a real
of course not.
phlebotomy test.
Of course not.
I mean, the most intense would just be like an asterisk that says like below normal range.
Out of range.
Yeah, out of range. Exactly.
Out of range.
And then it's up to the doctor to interpret that.
And they typically retest because it's a microsecond in time that you've caught.
Yeah.
Right. So this is a huge red flag.
Okay.
But this is like the cause of so many illnesses, from like unexplained fatigue to unexplained, or not even unexplained, but depression, anxiety, irregular menstrual cycles, whatever it is.
Yeah, and then it's like, oh, I've been so tired, but it's because of this systemic fungal infection because of my mercury poisoning. And once I get rid of the mercury, and it takes months, these chelation therapies she's doing, once I get rid of the mercury, then I can start working on the fungus.
Yeah.
And meantime, she's getting these B12 infusions.
Yeah.
And she's like, but I feel so good after. I'm like, yeah, because you're getting hydration. Like,
yeah.
Like, of course you're going to feel good after you get like an IV full of saline.
Yeah. And then, so the systemic candida, this is also a really common diagnosis. Okay. If you had a systemic fungal infection, you would be immunocompromised, first of all.
There you go.
And you would be incredibly sick.
And like, candida is what you get in your vagina when you have a yeast infection. Candida is what you get in your throat when you have AIDS or when you're elderly and you get thrush. Like, is itchy and horrible, and you feel it.
Itchy and horrible and feel it. And so if it was quote unquote systemic, you would be on the
blood.
Exactly. You would be on the brink of death. But so to test this, they often do stool tests, and then candida shows up in the poop. Okay.
There's candida in your poop.
Because there's candida in your poop. And this, and then they'll be like, oh, there's high levels of E. coli. And it's like, well, no shit, Sherlock.
Yeah, that's why you can't eat your poop, because you'll get sick. That's like when the spinach has E. coli, somebody didn't wipe their hands after they went poop. Like, that's why it got E. coli.
And then, like, the microbiome aspect to naturopathy, now that I do microbiome research, drives me crazy. So I want to say that I don't know any microbiome researchers that take probiotics. First of all.
Yeah.
I mean, they eat yogurt and cultured foods if they like it.
Sure,
and,
it tastes good.
are cognizant of the fact if they're on antibiotics, like, you maybe want to eat some more fermented foods.
Yeah.
But we don't understand, really, like, what exactly drives the composition of the gut microbiome. And it's certainly many factors. Like, your genes have a role to play. The environment, of course, has a role to play, but it's so complicated. It changes throughout the day. There's like a daily diurnal pattern to it. Of course, your hormones matter. So for a woman, like where you are in your menstrual cycle, it matters. Stress hormones, of course, make a difference. And then the bacterial levels change in response to what you eat.
Absolutely.
Probably because you're going to have like increases and decreases based on like what you need to digest and absorb things from that food. At least maybe, right? Maybe.
And certain foods are, less digestible, like insoluble fibers and soluble. I know somebody in my life who has kind of one of those, like, was always diagnosed with IBS, never knew what was wrong, finally got a good diagnosis. And it really does have to do with his gut flora. Like, he has a legitimate gastroenterologist that works with him in his gut flora. And he takes prescription level legitimate, and it's called a medical food probiotics that he has to buy from a legitimate pharmacy. And it's like, unless you're in that situation where you have super abnormal GI problems,
flora,
exactly,
or
like
C. difficile,
you've got C. diff, or you've got like this, intestinal overgrowth situations. Like, you probably don't need these things. You probably don't need to, and they sell them at these health food stores, like,
and they're so
5
expensive.
billion parts per 10 billion, 25 billion. And I'm like, I don't understand.
And I don't think they're regulated because I think they fall into the supplement category.
Yeah, I think only the medical, if it says medical food on it, then it's like a drug. They just can't call it a drug because it's a food. But that's FDA regulated. But yeah, supplements aren't FDA regulated.
Who knows if they're alive?
That's true. And you see that with yogurt.
Yep.
We used to do when I taught biology 1, we would do a fun lab that was the cell lab, and we would put different brands of yogurt under the microscope and look for living bacteria. And like certain brands, there was nothing alive in them.
Yeah.
So I can only imagine the pills are like that.
And they're heavy in lactobacillus, which is a genus of gut bacteria. But I was just looking at like the most abundant genera in 3 different populations. So one population was from Venezuela. They were living in the Amazon. One was from Africa and one was from the U.S. Lactobacillus makes up a very small part of the total composition.
Oh, interesting.
We
eat a ton of it.
But it's definitely not the most prevalent. Like it's like it's a small sliver. There's all of these other genera that are far more prevalent. So it's also interesting because it's like we're just giving a shit ton of this one genus, but we don't know
if it even need it.
And they compete with each other for resources, right?
So we can be making ourselves sicker.
Exactly.
Ugh.
It's not clear. It's not clear.
Because that's the thing. With C. diff, I mean, it seems like researchers are still trying to figure out why doing a poop transplant seems to actually cure. I think I can use that word, cure their C. diff. This like treatment-resistant bacterial infection. But they don't know what a healthy stool sample is. Like, they can look at it and see if it has any overt infections, but like, why did this stool sample get rid of this person's C. diff? We don't know what part per billion of different types of bacteria make, and it might be different for different people.
It's absolutely different for different. And thank you for bringing that up because the naturopaths will use this word like gut dysbiosis. This phrase, I have an imbalanced gut dysbiosis. Microbiome researchers are very cautious about this word because we can't really define dysbiosis because it's so different for each person.
Yeah, it seems
and the time of day.
Absolutely. I know that there's a legitimate test that's sometimes used for C. diff and for some of these other IBS related situations where they do these breath tests. And they can look at like how much basically sugar you're processing.
Lactose or something.
Right? Based on a normal person, when they take a shot of sugar, they're going to digest a certain amount, and then when they breathe, you'll find certain gases in it. And then a person who's got overactive or an overabundance might, but they don't know what's overabundant. They just know that like
something's off.
You've basically got a gut infection. And it's really, and they treat it with antibiotics.
It drives me crazy. So
it's difficult.
I get these emails from naturopaths that are like, "Oh, you're studying the microbiome. Well, naturopaths invented the field of microbiome research." I was like, "Oh, for Pete's sake."
Yeah, it's like, what research are you doing?
You're so delusional. You're so crazy.
And so, do they hate you?
Oh, yeah.
Because where was that point in time where you were like, I'm a practicing naturopath, now I'm speaking out against naturopathy? Like, how long did that transition take?
About May. So from May 2014 to January 2015.
So it was fast.
It was really fast because I was really angry.
So sort of like you just realized it one day.
Well, I was accidentally involved in a federal crime.
Oh my God. Okay, let's talk about this. I have to know what happened.
So I worked at a clinic, so I moved to Tucson to be with Taylor.
Mm-hmm.
And I got hired at this clinic that was owned by a really well-known, I would say famous naturopath.
Mm-hmm.
And
Which is like a dream job.
it was a dream job, and they gave me a killer contract. You know, I was able to support myself on the amount of money that I was making. So it was like, naturopaths notoriously have a really hard time making money. So this was like...
Because it's a sales job, basically.
Yeah, exactly. So this was awesome. And he was a naturopathic cancer specialist, is what he called himself.
That's like the worst thing I can imagine.
I know, cringe. And I was building my practice, so I wasn't seeing a lot of patients.
Mm-hmm.
And he was like, why don't you spend some time shadowing me? Because I do all of these cancer treatments. I need help. He's so busy that he didn't have enough. There wasn't enough of him to go around.
Yeah.
I can teach you how to do it. And then, you can help me and make some money. I was like, done.
Yeah.
Like not only am I going to make more money, but I'm learning from like Michael.
The best.
Yeah, exactly. The best from Michael Usick, like the best naturopathic cancer guy ever. So I was doing this. I did a lot of it in terms of like giving alternative cancer treatments to patients.
Oh God. So you were really in the lion's den, like doing the worst of the worst work.
Yep.
Yeah. Because it's one thing to like talk to somebody about their gut imbalances because they sometimes get headaches. And it's another thing for somebody to be like, I refuse chemotherapy and instead I want to take water. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. I have so many stories, Cara.
Oh God.
But basically, I found out, so we were giving them this medication called Ukraine. It was coming from
like the country?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's spelled without the E.
Okay.
But the manufacturer is Ukrainian, so he named it for his homeland.
There we go.
But he was making it in Austria.
Mm-hmm.
So the shipments were coming from Austria. The shipments didn't arrive. Patients were like, where's our Ukraine?
We need it. We have cancer.
Yeah, exactly. We need it. We have cancer. Like you're supposed to stick to this dosing schedule. It sort of emulates chemotherapy where it has to happen on a certain time frame.
Yeah.
And patients were paying for the medication up front, so they had already paid for it in cash. And like if it doesn't show up, like there's no refund coming from us.
Yeah, and it's not like insurance covers this shit.
No.
Yeah.
No. And Usick my boss was like, oh, everyone try not to worry. Britt and I told him that like patients were asking me like crazy about it. And he's like, maybe the FDA confiscated the package. And so my response was your face.
Yeah. Like, why would they do that if this is a legitimate treatment?
Yeah, basically. Exactly. So that was exactly my question. And so I went home and I sort of like relayed this information to Taylor. I was like, listen to this weird conversation I had with my boss. And he was also like, yeah, that's weird. So I was like, Google. And it sounds really naive, but like I hadn't thought to like Google what it was that I was giving because I had always seen the medication like packaged and presented to me like a real pharmaceutical medication.
Well, yeah, and you learned about it before you learned about it from something that you thought was more trustworthy, like the textbooks and the professors.
Yeah, and it had a drug insert, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And I had read this, and so it just like I didn't think about it.
And there were quote unquote pharmacies you had been working with that hawk this stuff. Yeah.
So I quickly realized that this drug was not approved by the FDA. And then I had to figure out what that meant. Mm-hmm. So that actually took like 2 days of internet research over the weekend.
And did you realize that basically everything you prescribe is not approved by the FDA? Although you could prescribe some.
Yeah, I did. So this was really like, it wasn't, I realized that I suddenly had like no idea like how drug regulation works and what this meant for me.
Because, of course, they didn't teach you that at all as part of your curriculum.
No. So I was really, really confused. And I couldn't figure out, like, why it was okay to give a vitamin or a supplement that had vitamins in it that wasn't FDA approved, but that you couldn't, that it was a federal crime to import a non-FDA drug and give it to a cancer patient. So it took, like, intense Googling to figure this out. And then I wasn't even sure. I was still really confused.
Yeah, it's like, but it's still under investigation. It's legal in those countries. We're just not caught up yet with our regulations.
Well, I found a lot of like really scary information. So like, you know, they had the company had the manufacturer had applied for FDA approval here in the US and was denied. And also denied in Canada, the UK, most European countries, Australia, New Zealand. And then I was
The
like,
developed
what?
world.
Whoa.
Yeah. Wow.
And then I found a case of a medical doctor who had given Ukraine to a patient and went to jail.
Whoa.
So I was like, okay. So that was all over one weekend.
And you had given it to how many patients?
Dozens.
Wow.
Dozens.
Wow. For how long at this point? Months?
Months.
Yeah.
And patients had died while we had.
Of course, because they had cancer.
They had, terminal cancer.
They had terminal cancer, and they weren't getting legitimate treatment.
And then I found out that some of that there are all these side effects associated with this drug.
Oh, no.
And some of our patients died with symptoms that resembled those side effects. So it became really like I wasn't sure like if I had killed a patient or, you know.
I can only imagine.
It was horrifying.
Yeah.
So Monday morning I called it the most expensive lawyer that I could find, medical malpractice super lawyer that I could find in Tucson. And I didn't have an appointment. I literally just showed up like to this really fancy law firm. And I just walked to the front desk and I can't stop crying. I'm just a total mess. I'm like, I want to speak to attorney Richard Davis, please. I'm just crying.
And did you have professional liability insurance? Or you did need it as a naturopath?
I don't know if you're required to have it in Arizona.
But you wanted to have it.
But I did have it,
Okay, so you were started out.
So I had that.
Yeah.
And this lawyer was so cool. He was so cool. And he was so matter of fact. And he's like, yep, you're on notice.
Wow.
Like, you only have one option. You got to quit. You got to talk to the attorney general, and you got to report him to the board. And you're lawyering up.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah, because you're basically the best kind of witness they can have because you're somebody who was duped.
Yeah.
Like you really were duped. And if they're willing to give you, because you're also an adult and you also are a licensed naturopath. So if they're willing to give you the benefit of the doubt and they believe you when you say like, I found the light and I want to shut this shit down, you could probably get, and I'm assuming you did get, what's the word for it?
Immunity.
Immunity. Thank you.
So I was offered immunity from the attorney general, but it turned out I didn't actually need it because I don't really know what happened. I know he was investigated by the attorney general, but in order to get the drug, patients were paying for it in cash. And they got it through a money wiring system that took place outside of the clinic. So I don't know what.
There's a paper trail.
Yeah. I don't know. And I had to just like check out because honestly, I was an emotional disaster.
Well, yeah, because not only is it like I could go to prison, but beyond that, it's like, what am I doing?
Yeah, I felt sick.
Yeah.
I mean, I was so. I mean, I had a psychiatrist and a psychologist. I took some Xanax.
Yeah.
I was having panic attacks because I was imagining myself having to testify.
Yeah.
And now I was really afraid of my former boss because now he was starting to bully me and say things like, if I'm getting in trouble, you're getting in trouble too.
So you were still in communication with him kind of at the beginning?
Yeah, I had to be because you can't just walk away from your practice. Otherwise, it's called patient abandonment. So you have to give patients enough time to find another practitioner and transfer care. So I couldn't just be like, peace out, I'm never coming back in here.
Yeah.
I had to report him, confront him in person, tell him I'm leaving, and then show up to work for another 6 weeks.
God, how horrible.
It was awful.
And that must be what it's like, too, for physicians who, like, see abuse and malpractice, who have to point to other physicians. Just keep going to work. But in this case, it was like not malpractice. It was full-on fraud.
And then everyone at the clinic hated me because now the entire clinic was in peril.
Well, yeah, because you unraveled the threads. It was already tenuous, but they didn't know that.
So the receptionists were mad at me. Like, everybody hated me.
And so really, when we think about like naturopathy or we think about these alternative treatment facilities, standing from the outside as a skeptic looking in, we often have the question, and I think ultimately the answer is, does it really matter? But I'm fascinated, maybe because of the psychology background, like, are these people complicit? Do they actually believe what they're hawking, or are they actual charlatans? And obviously, I would say that the receptionists probably fully trusted and believed that the physicians were doing their thing. You obviously fully believed what you were doing until you realized that you didn't. Do you think that he, this like Superman naturopath, really believed what he was hawking?
I think he's delusional.
Yeah.
Because I asked him, because my question to him was, and his business partner who was involved in this too, in the financial aspect, so I brought her in for this meeting of quitting. Did you know that this drug is not FDA approved? And if so, do you know what that means? And it was a fair question because I didn't know what it meant, really. And his sweet business partner, who's not a naturopath, who she was just like investing money, didn't know and didn't understand. And so she was really upset. And so she was in tears. He totally knew. And he was like, I can evaluate the evidence for using this drug better than the FDA.
Yeah.
That's what he said.
Yeah. I'm not surprised.
So, like, to me, that's just like he's delusional, like delusions of grandeur. Like, he knows better than all of these health authorities.
Yeah, it does seem like there has to be a certain level of narcissism to keep doing naturopathy even when the wool has been pulled out from over your eyes. Like, you saw the light, and I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of other naturopaths saw the light and either made the decision to leave or said, in spite of this, I still think what I'm doing is for the best, so I'm going to keep doing it.
Well, I know that a lot of naturopaths have seen the light because I get emails. Most don't attach names to their emails because they're somehow afraid that I'm going to like make it public that naturopath Joe Schmo agrees with me, which I've never done. So I don't understand. Naturopaths, you don't have to be afraid of me. I'm not going to expose you.
Exactly. Like, it would not be in your best interest or the best interest of the skeptic movement, but I'm sure there's always a fear because it's probably so beat into you that like mainstream, like the other side wants to expose us.
Yeah. But we spend hundreds of thousands of dollars becoming a naturopath, and they literally cannot afford to walk away from their careers because once you've invested that much in student loans, you can't get more. You're maxed out. You can't get more student loans to pay for school. So I could not have re-educated myself in the U.S. So thank God for Germany in that sense, because only because the program was free that I was able to go back to school. But if we stayed in the U.S., and I was just having this conversation with my husband, like, I don't know. It would be a very different scenario.
I mean, it seems like the number one problem here, other than, there's so many changes that need to take place at the state levels, at the federal level, with regulating naturopathy as a practice. But gosh, this accreditation issue looks like a low-hanging fruit to me. Like, that needs to be the first thing to change.
Yeah, so I'm trying to tackle it, but it's actually harder than you think because it's accredited by naturopaths and chiropractors. So then you have to go through the Department of Education. They're a beast. I mean, I think the best shot is to be able to show that there's deceptive marketing, actually, and to kind of go for it like these schools that promise jobs and like at a certain job rate. But even that's really difficult to prove because now that I've started blogging, Bestier has changed how they describe their program.
Yeah, because obviously it's like, oh, well, if there's a regulatory thing in place that says you have to do it this way, we'll just do it that way now so that we don't get busted. And you've been blogging for Forbes, right?
Yeah.
And how long have you been doing that?
I think a year.
And so, I mean, I did a couple stories on SGU that I pulled from the writing that you did on the turmeric injection. So if people remember that from the SGU. And then SGU is writing a book right now. That's been made public. Steve announced that on the show recently. But I dug a little bit into those stories for the book as well. I mean, nobody else is really writing about that. Like, once in a blue moon, something big will happen and the lid will be blown off of it and the word naturopathy will be mentioned. But doing this kind of investigative work about constant malfeasance and constant fraud within naturopathy or perpetrated by naturopaths you're really pounding the pavement in a way that nobody else is doing. And I feel like your story has that much more weight because you can empathize with these people. You were one of these people. It's not like sometimes I think in the skeptic movement, it's like easy for us to go like, oh, well, that's garbage and that's bullshit. And let me laugh at it or let me talk about why it's so obviously wrong. But until you've really lived it, it's probably very difficult to fully understand the web that they cast. And you're a smart person. I mean, you're getting your PhD, you have a master's, you're starting your PhD, you speak all across the world telling your story. You're not like, dumb, and you're not like ultra naive. So if it could happen to you.
Yeah, I think it could happen I think it happens pretty easily.
Yeah, I mean, what's the one thing that you had going against you? You were young.
Yeah.
But most people are when they're at that age.
Choose graduate schools.
Yeah, they've just finished their undergrad. If you never took a break, you're 22.
Exactly.
That's so young.
Yeah.
Like, you shouldn't be making any big life decisions at
My
22.
brain was still growing.
Exactly.
No, I know. You should wait until you're at least, 25 until
Yeah,
it's
totally. It is crazy that we have so many of these big things: getting married, having children, starting a family, choosing what we're going to do for our career, choosing how we're going to invest our money in our early 20s. Often,
I agree.
I'm 33, and I'm like, I am not old enough for any of these major decisions.
Totally. I agree. Especially when you're paying all of that money.
I know.
Because you're just, you have to commit. You have to go for it.
I mean, the motivated reasoning there becomes so overwhelming because there's just something intrinsic in making a purchase that much. You have to dive in face first or foot first or whatever you want to say, as you said. And you also, it's unfathomable that this would be illegitimate.
Right. Because why would they let me take out $220,000?
Yeah, why would the federal government approve this?
Exactly.
And that really is the question. Why the fuck is the federal government approving
this? Well, I think it's a house of cards. I think it's going to all come crashing down. Now, I might just be feeling optimistic about this, but the reality is that I don't think any naturopath that graduates recently can pay off their student loan debt. Mm-hmm. So at some point, we're all going to default.
Yeah, that's true.
We're all signed up for these like income-based repayment plans, and at the 20-year mark, we'll have paid back maybe 10% of our student loan debt, and then I will probably be writing off $400,000 in student loan debt. Because it compounds the interest. So I'm up to $326,000
so
because of the compounded interest that I've been accruing since I was 28 or whatever when I graduated from naturopathic school.
And for literally nothing. For almost going to prison.
Yeah.
Wow. I mean, it does seem like there should be some legal recourse here. Like you fucking took advantage of me. Like your entire institution is fraud. Like, didn't Trump finally settle out of court?
Yeah. So students, not me, actually, students have tried to bring class action lawsuits. Mm-hmm. And I submitted documents as part of that. I never really had conversations with the lawyers, but I think I had way more documentation than most because you have to be able to prove that there was like false information given to you about the jobs or
but there were promises made to you about how this would educate you and prepare you for future employment.
And they need things like the original marketing documents.
Yeah.
And like whatever the course handbook was from, like that was 2007. I didn't save that thinking, one day I might have to sue my institution.
No, of course not. You save it if you're like just the kind of person who likes the trinkets to remember it.
But if you move every 4 years like I did, you're like, let's get rid of this.
Of course.
Yeah.
And when everything's online, that's even scarier because if you never got the paper document, they can just upgrade the website. And unless you took a screen cap.
Unless you go to the Wayback Machine.
Yeah, the Wayback Machine.
Oh, God, I spent hours on the Wayback Machine.
Oh my gosh, Britt, can I have you on the podcast again to keep talking about this?
Yes.
Like, that would be so fun. Okay, because we've been talking for an hour and 20, and I told you I'd only keep you for an hour.
Okay.
But before we go, I close my podcast every week by asking my guests the same two questions. So I'm interested in your answers to these two questions because you are a very different guest than I typically have on the show. So, kind of big picture questions. They are about the future. Okay. And they could be about your personal future, like, your career. Obviously, you're starting a whole new chapter. They could be about the future of, your family, your town, but they can be about the future of humanity. It's, you can answer it however you like. So they are, when you think about the future, number one, what is the thing that sort of preoccupies your thoughts, keeps you up at night, worries you, bums you out, whatever the case may be, that you're like, ugh, God, this is the future. But on the flip side of that, so we don't cry, what is the thing that you are actually really like legitimately optimistic about and looking forward to and kind of hopeful for?
The first one's really easy. actually, because I'm worried that I'm never going to be able to move back to the U.S. Because I don't know.
Because of the debt.
Yep.
Wow.
Because, and I mean, it's not because I'm going to run away from the payments or anything.
Yeah.
I just mean by living in Germany, we have access to social services like healthcare and childcare and free college. So the idea of starting a family seems much more financially is much more financially doable in a country like Germany compared to the U.S.
Well, yeah, with oppressive student loan debt, trying to get a mortgage, trying to get a new lease, trying to, like, a lot of things. Or if you get healthcare debt on top of that, you know, if you want to have a baby in the U.S., you got to pay for that shit.
Yeah, but you don't in Germany.
Yeah, and then on top of that, like, if the Affordable Care Act gets appealed, you know, that like we're right in the midst. I don't know what's going to have happened by the time this posts, but right now we're right in the midst of, like, the House passed it, it's falling apart in the Senate. And we don't know.
I'm watching it very carefully because I'm terrified, actually. Not just the health bill, but also I'm terrified of Trump repealing the measures that Obama put in place for students to pay back their student loans.
Absolutely.
So he could repeal this income-based repayment program, and could repeal the program that would allow students to write off their debt after making every payment on time for 20 years. And so this, like when I've called my student loan lenders and just been like, I'm really scared. And they're like, I wish I could reassure you. Unfortunately, we can't. Just keep doing what you're doing, you know, keep documenting everything. They're so sympathetic, and they're so empathetic and sympathetic, and I have heart-to-heart conversations with the people on the student from my student loan companies, because they're just like, I feel for you.
And it's like just that much compounded. You don't think about it. I have a friend who finished medical school recently. I think she's second year resident now, and you know, she's hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, and she thinks, oh, it's crushing, like my student loan, oh my God. But she has a legitimate medical position now where, granted, I mean, and she is in a relatively high-paying medical field. She's a radiologist, but like, even still, she's freaking out because she's like, it's going to be X number. I mean, the Obamas famously said before they got into office that they just recently paid off their student loan debt from becoming lawyers. But that's with working as lawyers and doctors.
Yeah,
like
I mean, you will be able to pay it off.
Yeah.
The reality is that I will not pay it off.
Exactly.
I mean, I won't.
And not only that, you won't be able to, probably.
No, I hope that I can somehow like have the debt relief after showing I've made payments on time, you know, after showing that I've been like trying.
Yeah, because the truth of the matter is, like, who are you indebted to? An illegitimate organization. Like, that's the frustration.
Yeah.
This isn't just like, oh, I took money from the government. No, the money went to this establishment that is, it's licensed. I mean, it's, you know, it's regulated by itself.
Yeah.
It's accredited by itself.
Yeah.
And it's magic.
Yeah.
It's teaching people how to prescribe magic.
So it's not just that I wasted time and money, which I did.
And
but
you can't get back.
But now that I'm in Germany, and now that I'm moving on and, you know, have new career potential, and, you know, I'm not depressed in the same way. But this other piece of grief comes up, which is I feel like it's actually taken away. I feel like it's taken away my future, actually.
Or at least one option.
One option for my future, which is to continue to be an American and live in America.
Where your family is.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, luckily, there's no travel ban out of Germany. And you're able to freely travel between all of these countries. I don't see that changing, even with crazy Trump doing what he's doing. Yeah. But I mean, obviously it's a very personal and I think a really important answer to that question. But there must be things that you're hopeful for and excited about. New chapter.
New chapter. So I'm so new to the skeptic movement that this is only my second conference of skepticism. Yep.
But you're doing some more, like, I think we're going to be together in Australia, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, that's awesome.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it'll be fun.
It's going to be really fun. Yeah.
And I love coming to these conferences because I have a renewed sense of optimism when I'm here, because skeptics have historically terrified me, but people at the conference are so supportive. and they're so kind, and they want to help. Tell us what we can do. Tell us, how do we become politically involved? Who do I contact? And so this is really encouraging. I feel like people really want to get involved. I don't sense apathy. I don't sense that's like, oh, well, the problem's too big. We might as well not deal with it. No, there's like a real sense of like people wanting to be proactive.
Which would be easy to do. I mean, I feel like that a lot. Like, I feel like I want to do something, but holy shit, how am I supposed to do it? But when you see the wins that the skeptic movement has actually gotten over the years, you hear about things that are happening in the UK and in Australia, and also here, against alternative medicine and homeopathy. It's important. And also just taking stock of like the laws across states. Yes, Seattle is a very liberal place. Yes, Arizona had very liberal law, but they were the most liberal laws for naturopathy, which means in other places they are getting it right. Or at least they're on the path to get it right.
They're trying. So I feel optimistic. I think at some point the skeptic movement is going to start going on the offense. I'd love to see legislation introduced to sort of block the licensing of alternative practitioners before, they get their foot in the door politically. Yeah. And so these conversations are starting to happen. And this is really exciting because this is where I think I would be really, I think I would flourish here because I love to talk to lawmakers and I love to talk. So, if we can figure out how to like mobilize this energy even more, it's going to be awesome. And I see it coming.
Well, and your story, I mean, I think I said it before, but I don't know how articulate I was, is just really, really important because I think you can say this to legislators in a way that I never could. Because I wasn't there. I didn't have my boots on the ground, and I haven't been on both sides of the conversation and seen the light. It's like somebody who escaped from a cult. Only they can really talk about what it's like inside. And it's so important for the people who are making these really impactful decisions to hear from those who are sensitive to it, who have empathy for the experience, and who kind of live that journey. Especially for the general public who, like you did at the beginning, like I did before I joined this movement, don't really know the difference.
Yeah.
Don't really know what the words mean.
Right.
A lot of people aren't invested in this, I think simply because they don't know the damage that can be caused by it.
Exactly.
And as soon as they're enlightened, and that's why I love that your column is in Forbes. It's not in Scientific American, which I love Scientific American, but Scientific American has a specific readership. It's not in Popular Science or National Geographic, which actually probably has a broader readership. It's in Forbes, which is generally considered like a political or kind of news magazine.
Money and lots of
money. Yeah. It's like more like the CNBC of magazines. And so it's really great because I think it reaches a totally different audience. So everybody, you should check out Britt's column in Forbes. And if you want to get in touch with her via social media, where can they find you?
I'm on Twitter at Naturo Diaries. Of course, my blog, naturopathicdiaries.com, and then on Facebook.
Nice. And then are you going to be anywhere that you know of before Skepticon in Australia?
Yeah, I'm going to CSICon in Vegas.
CSICon. Oh, I'll see you there too. That's amazing. Yeah, the Skeptic's Guide should be there. And then I'll be with you at Skepticon in Australia. And I think there's a little bit in New Zealand as well.
Yep.
Yeah.
Hop on over, yeah.
Ah, so fun. Have you been yet?
No.
Me neither. I've been to Australia, but not New Zealand.
We're going to go shark diving. You should come.
Oh my God, that sounds so scary.
You're coming.
Okay, I got time to prep. All right. Well, Britt, again, thank you so much for joining me. Fascinating conversation. We went a whole hour and a half, and I feel like I could talk to you for 3 more hours. This was great.
Cool.
Yeah.
My pleasure.
And everybody listening, thank you for coming back week after week. I'm really looking forward to the next time we all get together to talk nerdy.